For problem number 2, it says create a new function file named modify array and write a function, there we go, that changes the specified row. So here's a row value in an array, so here's my old array, to the first value in the row. For example, if old array is 1, 2, blah, 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 I'm going to go ahead and write that down here. So old array is 1, 2, 3, semicolon stacking on top of each other, so 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8, 9. So here's old array. And row equals 3. Then new array equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 7. So it takes the first value in the array and copies it to all of them. So this 7 is copied to all the locations. So your function calculations must do the following. Test that the value of row is valid. So row needs to be a valid row by using an if-and structure. So if statement. So that's something I need to use. To check if the old array contains the row number, if the row is invalid, return a value of -1 for new array. Otherwise, the function must change the row to the first value in the row. It contains the appropriate help text lines, H1 and help text lines. Okay? So I've identified most of my pieces. New script, function, new array. Technically, you can name your variables whatever you want. They don't need to be old array, new array, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes it's just easier not to have to think. Save it. My H1 line is this one, so modify array. So your function name's all capitalized. And then you have a short description of what you want your function does. So changes the row in an array to contain all the same number, which is the first number in that row. However you would describe it. And then list out your use case, which is literally just this. Tells you how to use your function, then you have inputs. They don't need to be terribly specific, just they need to exist. They need to be meaningful. Okay, so it says insert your function or insert your comments. So here's where you would be graded on comments. So make sure when it says it must contain H1 and help text lines, make sure you insert these lines so you get the points, the easy points. Okay, if it says it needs it, it's going to be graded on it. So now here's where I go ahead and change something. So I need to do an if statement. So if row is greater than the number of rows I have in old array. So I can go ahead and say R is the number of rows, size, old array, comma 1. I just want the number of rows, so I'm going to use the first dimension. So if row is greater than R, or row is less than 1. My valid rows, 1, 2, 3 in this example. So it means it can't be less than 1 and can't be greater than the number of rows. So if it's outside of that range, then new array equals -1. Else. Otherwise, I need to go ahead and figure out what I want new array to be. So think about two sides of your equal sign. Where do you want to change? What do you want to change it to? I want to change this entire row. My entire row. So new array, row, whatever that row is, all columns. What do I want to change it to? This value here. That value is new array, row, comma 1. This is not an overly complex modification of our array. It's not overly complex, but we need to identify where do we want to change, what do we want to change, what do we want to change it to. if you can't think about it in terms of variables, think about it in terms of this example. I want to change row 3 to 3, 1. Then think about, okay, what variables, what changes if my variables change? 3 would change. That's an indicator that it's going to be one of my variables. This 1 doesn't change. It's always the first number in that row. And then new array is yelling at me. It says new array might be used before it's defined. So I need to go ahead and say new array equals old array. I need to go ahead and start out my new array as my old array values, and then I can go ahead and change it. I can put that down here as well. Keep in mind, you will be given partial credit. So if you were missing something, if there's an error, that's fine. If you can't debug it, that's totally fine. You will get partial credit. Insert as much as you can. Okay, for a function, you want to test to make sure that it works. If you have time. If you don't have time, that's okay. You get plenty of partial credit. If you do have time, you cannot just run a function file. You have to call it from your command window, which means you do need to identify what variable you want to use for old array, what variable you want to use for row. So I can go ahead and say a equals rand I don't know, 10, we'll make it a 3 by 3. And let's say, so a looks like that, and let's say I want to go ahead and change column 2. So I can start n equals modify array a and change column 2. So now column 2 should contain all 4s, and it does. You go ahead and change a as well. So let's say a is a 4 by, let's say a is a 4 by 7. So a looks like that. And let's say we want to modify array a and make it row 1. I did that wrong. A and make it row 1. There we go. So it's now all 7. And then we can go ahead and check to see if what if rows is invalid? So 0. Yep, that's correct. What if it's 10? That's also incorrect. So we can see how all of those, test all of our ranges. So if it's inside the range, outside the range, to check to make sure that our function works as we want it to work. And there's problem 2.